ultimately, the way that you win in war is the largest amount of people are convinced of your point of view. If we use that metric to decide who has and who hasn't won the war, then Gaza has been victorious over Israel in an unprecedented way. There was never a time when Elbit, Israel's largest arms company, lost value, that the value of its shares decreased during a war. Ma'arakat Sayf al-Quds, 2021. We targeted their factory in Leicester for 6 continuous days. The police appealed to the fire brigade, said, can you take these individuals off the roof? The fire brigade said no. The police appealed to the community, so can you help us get these individuals down? The community said no. Even in the midst of that, Elbit Systems' value was still increasing. With this war today, Elbit's shares and the value of them are plummeting. Israel has more enemies today in the world than it ever has had in the history of the Zionist colony. There are more people in the world who view Zionism as anti-life, as antithetical to the region, actually. There are more people who are opposed to a future for Zionism in the region than ever before. Israel has already lost. What it's doing in Lebanon is increasing that downward spiral. And of course, as we know from all historical precedents, when you are closest to victory, that is the point when the enemy will be the most ferocious, the most vicious. And this is all part of that drive downwards and downwards and downwards. How is this sustainable? What do you think are the kind of things that those individuals who have been quote unquote displaced from the north of occupied Palestine since October to now, what do you think they are saying about the Israeli government? What do you think is happening in the hostels and the hotels that they are living in at the expense of the Israeli government? There are documented examples of abuse, of all manner of social ills popping up in those hostels and hotels, and people who are really furious with the state of affairs. And actually, Netanyahu has been read by the Ben Gvir, Smotrich, more Jabotinsky-ite side of the Zionist movement to have been soft. They've been saying, when will you put the people back in their houses in the north? Now, what Israel thinks that it can achieve is a form of creative chaos, a shock doctrine, whereby it shocks the enemy into a state of paralysis. But the very proof that today, in the smoke from the Israeli airstrikes, there were rockets which fired back instantly, even striking illegal Israeli settlements close to Nablus. This is also unprecedented. And you now have, just recently, just in the last few hours, it announced by the Iraqi government that they are establishing a land bridge to send fuel and aid to Lebanon. You know, one of the key things that Israel is underestimating here is that when it attempts to impose and subjugate its will on Gaza, it knows that Gaza is landlocked. That has been the strategic objective for all the years of this siege. Landlock Gaza and lock the governments around it into arrangements which mean there can be no real sustainable material aid coming to Gaza in a way which opposes Israel. Lebanon is not landlocked. Do you know who Israel will be fighting if it makes the deadly error of launching a ground operation? Do you think it will just be fighting the 100,000 fighters of Hezbollah? You're wrong. It will be fighting fighters from Yemen. It will be fighting fighters from Iraq. You have even had the Taliban send a message to Lebanon to say that in the event of a ground operation by Israel, we will send thousands of fighters to aid you. The kind of conditions that were established in Syria with fighters from all around the world gravitating towards it, is that what Israel wants in Lebanon? Is that the kind of war of attrition that Israel is capable of withstanding? It's not. And that's why it excels at bombing civilian targets. These are not incidental. These times when Israel is bombing an ambulance, no, that's not an accident by any stretch of the imagination. That is a military strategy, which is you petrify the civilian population and you try to force them to move and to flee. Israel's doing this now in order to avoid a ground operation, but ultimately its hand may be forced. And once that step is taken, I am in no doubt that that will be a deadly step for the Israelis and backfire massively.
Yeah, Ghadi, I want to bring you back in to talk about that possibility, because and comment on those contradictions that Lowkey just laid out, because you have people like Benny Gantz talking about all-out war needs to happen on Lebanon in order for their objectives to be met, as we spoke about earlier. And you also have an Israeli spokesperson talking about how all the way up to the Litani River is Israeli territory. And that means that the resistance, Hezbollah in particular, needs to back off. But yet there are, while on the one hand, Israel is conducting this massive bombing campaign, I think what Lowkey said about this, just this pressure to, on the one hand, invade, but on the other hand, also this bombing campaign being a way to avoid that, feels like unsustainable. And I'm curious about your thoughts about this.
First of all, I don't give any credit to any Israeli statement because they say all sorts of things. It's wishful thinking at that point. They were speaking about that Litani thing, and they're speaking about flattening Beirut since day one of this war. If you look at their social media and everything, but they have zero credibility inside their own communities and their own policies. Nobody trusts them. We've seen the Israelis protesting Netanyahu. You want me to believe that war criminal? We believe our leaders. We believe them because they have proven that they are credible. And I think in any case of ground invasion, we will not need... It's nice, this analogy that Lowkey made between Syria and Lebanon, but it's not really relatable in that sense. We are the sons and the daughters of this land. We know it just like the palms of our hands. In 2006, it was maybe 6 men of Hezbollah that burned down the Merkavas. 6, literally 6, in mountains, in villages in South Lebanon. Yes, it is not incidental, these massacres that are being carried on. But I don't think the Israelis are capable of any ground invasion, and this is why the Americans have been trying to protect them. When you hear an American mediator saying, we don't want this war to escalate, we don't want a full-blown war, it's not because they want to protect the Lebanese people. It's because they want to protect the Israeli presence. Now it's very simple. Netanyahu is fighting for his own presence, for his own political career. The only card he can play is more war, because internally he has many problems. Number one, he did not bring any hostage back. Number two, he did not eradicate Hamas. Number three, the settlers are displaced. Number four, these far-right people do not want to go to war with him and do not want to stay in government. Number five, the left people do not want to be with him and do not want to stay in the government. What is Netanyahu without a war today? He's done. Now America is trying to think more than Netanyahu. What is Israel if it continues this war? It's also gone, because this region and these people have nothing to lose and everything to win, and they have been very empowered in the past decade or 2 decades. We're speaking about Iraqis, Lebanese, Palestinians, and so on. And also, when I want to go back to that point that Lowkey started with about Gaza being victorious because it has proven its point to more people. I always say this in every conversation I have in every podcast. Our alliance is now students of the United States of America, the people of the UK in the streets, the legislation and the people of Ireland and Scotland and Spain and South Africa and Asia. We have the alliance that is pro-Palestine, is not only the global South, it's the future global North as well. Whereas Israelis inside occupied Palestine are not united. They really have a big existential question right now, because this is an entity that is built on selling a dream of bringing people from around the world to make them settle in our land because somebody 3,000 years ago told them that it's theirs. When you come and your whole point, you bring a person from America or from Europe, a colonizer, and you convince them that this land is where they will do whatever they want. And then they are forcibly displaced, and they have all these colonizers from all around the world that you bring. You have to fit them in one hospital. And they start to understand that they are not one community. And this is why these problems are resurfacing. Whereas in actual communities like us, like in Palestine, like in Gaza, you see one tent with tens of people from one extended family. From Gaza, from southern Gaza, from Sinai to northern Syria to eastern Iraq, this region is all one extended family, Danny. And these colonizers are different parts of the scum of the earth because they have proven that they are psychopaths who enjoy slaughtering children. Do you think they can win over us? It's a matter of time.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, I want to bring you back in because everything that Ghadi was thinking, I was actually getting emotional because this feels like a historic moment in the long trajectory of the anti-colonial movement, which we don't talk so much about these days, especially in the collective West, because our minds have been turned into mush in many respects. But I wanted to get you back in here to talk about that, perhaps to go off of what Ghadi was saying, and also this notion that, you know, there is, I feel like the axis of resistance is a manifestation of what Ghadi was saying, is that it is indeed one nation in many respects, one family, one large global community, just in the region itself, this, you know, cradle of civilization. But Lowkey, I want to bring you back in.
Well, there's a few ways in which this rings true. Also, it's important to understand that Israel and Britain and the United States have historically thought that exertions of violence and assassinations would lead to the killing of ideas. So in 1935, when the British killed Izzuddin al-Qassam in Palestine, the objective was killing the nascent Palestinian nationalist movement. What happened? Not only did you then have the longest strike in recorded human history carried out by the Palestinians in the revolt of 1936, which continued until 1939, but the very rockets which today are landing in places where people in Gaza themselves were driven from are named after that individual killed in 1935, Izzuddin al-Qassam. So this is the extent of stubbornness in a positive way, of a refusal to die that you are dealing with. And ultimately, as has been alluded to, the Zionist connection to this place is a more synthetic and casual and replaceable connection, truly. Yes, there are different elements of the Zionist movement. There are those with more commitment in a messianic way to the land. There are those pushing for the replacement of Al-Aqsa with a temple which it's believed by Zionists has existed twice in human history, and they hope to assert it for a third time on the ruins of Al-Aqsa. But what you have on the other side is a group of people that have withstood all manner of indignity and oppression in order to stay steadfast where they are. What was the plan of the Palestinian Authority? The plan was to demobilize and disarm the Palestinian population in the West Bank. Where are we today? We are today at a point where Tulkarim, Jenin, Nablus, these places are armed and they are resisting with new generations who did not live through the Nakba and did not live through the Naksa. So Israel has, whatever it has done, whatever way it has tried to enforce violence on these people and dominate their lives, it has simply not been able to succeed. And even the important thing to remember about the Abraham Accords was it was not only about economic integration, but military integration. So today you have a situation where the UAE hacks the phones of its own citizens using an Israeli intelligence company by the name Celebrite in a deal which was put together by the former head of Israel's external intelligence agency, Mossad, where even the Saudi Arabian government hacks the phones of its own citizens using the same Israeli intelligence company, Celebrite. You have a situation where both the Saudis and the UAE are invested through Jared Kushner's hedge fund, Affinity Partners, in the Shlomo Group, which arms the Israeli army with vehicles and ships. It builds the ships for the Israeli military, where Affinity Partners is now invested in one of the top shareholders in Elbit Systems. What Israel has succeeded in doing is even besieging itself in these places that it has achieved integration. This period has been the great clarifier. And this was something even predicted by resistance factions in Gaza. They said that there will come a time when Gaza will reveal all of those who are coordinating and who are betraying our people behind closed doors, because there's really nowhere for them to hide in this context. And as you pointed to, the Palestinian struggle, in a way, Palestine was taken by Zionist invaders and alien settlers while the rest of the global south was going through the process of decolonization. The majority of nation states at the United Nations are products of decolonization. The majority of humanity perceive themselves to be post-colonial subjects. The majority now of humanity see themselves in the Palestinians and do not see themselves in the Israelis. What type of future do you want to live in? And you know, it's often said that those who are demonized in life are lionized in death. So you have a situation where those who today are attempting to stop Palestine Action targeting the factories will say that they targeted the factories. Those who attempted to ban the demonstrations will say they were on the demonstrations. And those who tried to squash the forces of resistance will claim in decades to come that they aided the resistance. It is our job. It's our job as musicians, as journalists, as thinkers, as writers, to document what is happening now, every single detail, because this is a story of liberation. Not only a story of the liberation of Palestine and the liberation of Lebanon, but a way in which people were liberating themselves through Palestine and through Lebanon. There is a lesson in this. And again, we must reiterate our call to our siblings in the global south. Take a stronger position. The time is now. Take these measures. Official sanctions, not unofficial sanctions. Stop allowing Israel to push and bully you back into the same pattern of business which existed before. You know, Israel has no choice but perpetual war, because Zionism cannot integrate into this region. And so therefore this is real Zionism now. This is the real Zionism. This is the real Nakba now. And Israel is finding itself in an unsustainable position, but more support is needed from around the world.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.